Thank you. Hey, good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming to this Warriors Corner. I'm real excited to get the opportunity to talk to you about a couple of things today. First off, the two distinguished gentlemen who are going to come after me are going to talk about their support to us as the customer. But as the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, we are forward staged in Bavaria, Germany. We're one of the two maneuver brigades that are forward staged in Europe. And being forward in Europe gives us a unique position and also gives us a unique perspective, I think, on our adversaries. So instead of having to be prepared for multiple threats across the whole spectrum, we kind of know who the enemy is. As you heard in here, we look a lot at the Russians and Russian aggression, and that remains a focus for us. For the 2nd Cavalry Regiment, is a Stryker-based platform. We have one battalion that is currently forward in the Enhanced Forward Presence, which is a NATO requirement. So we are forward in northern Poland as part of the NATO decision that came out of the Warsaw Summit last year. So those guys are forward working for a Polish brigade commander, a mechanized brigade commander up there, providing him with some increased capability on the ground up there. And that's part of making 30,000 look and feel like 300,000 that Troy Meisel talked about in there. Recognizing that the adversary, that we've got a very identifiable and obvious adversary with the Russian threat, that allows us some unique capabilities. We wake up every morning, and instead of having to look at it across a whole spectrum of threat, we're able to really address a specific capability and a specific series of threats there. And what we did is we started looking at this about last year. We started digging into the problem sets that we might face, and we identified some shortages in our capabilities. Electronic warfare, counter-UAS capabilities, air defense capabilities. And what that allowed us to do is to go back. There's several offices, across the Army that work this stuff, and the two gentlemen here will talk about it, but it allowed us to go back and say, look, we've got requirements, we think, to make us more effective in deterring this Russian threat, and then if necessary, we assure our allies, we deter the Russian threat, and then if necessary, we actually defend the alliance against Russian aggression. So that capability, that's the mindset that we took as the main customer. A couple things internal to our formation, though, as we went back and identified these requirements, we were also very willing to test, evaluate, and then provide feedback early on in the process, knowing that we weren't always going to get the perfect solution. There's a couple platforms now. They're counter-UAS mobile integrated capability, the CIMIC, which is an off-the-shelf fusion of several different systems that allows us to counter UASs. The first draft of that came out there was not perfect, and that allowed us as the users to provide input to have the software rewritten so that it's doing what we need to do. I feel the same way about the ICV Dragoon, the 30 millimeter upgrade, the Stryker lethality upgrade that you'll hear about in just a minute. We've been involved in that process since the very beginning. We've sent NCOs back to work on loadouts. We just recently allowed some of our soldiers to go back and actually shoot the weapon system and provide feedback to the guys that are building that capability for us. And that, I think, is my role here as I speak to this, is identifying the threat and then communicating early as to what we feel like the capability gaps are that we have, and then going back and saying, hey, we're willing to test and participate in the process, knowing it won't always be perfect, and knowing that we're going to have to provide some feedback along the way. And we've committed to that with PEO GCS and also with the Rapid Capabilities Office, and both these gentlemen will talk about that. But our commitment to participating in the process, I think, is what's making this process work, and we are getting systems in our hands, in the hands of our soldiers, so that we're ready to use these tools on a timeline that's much more aggressive, I think, than we've seen in the past. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
So my name is Doug Wiltsie. I stood up here about a year ago as we rolled out the Rapid Capability Office, and our first focus was Europe. Our first focus was contested environments. For those who don't know, the Rapid Capability Office is a little bit unique in that we have a board of directors that decides everything that we do. Our focus is on strategic gaps where there is not a material solution in the next 1 to 5 years. And our board is comprised of the Secretary of the Army, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and the Army Acquisition Executive. And so when we first started, we looked out to see where those strategic gaps were. The Chief told us to look at Europe, specifically electronic warfare, GPS-denied environments, and then cyber. And so we got together with the USAR commanders, we got together with Colonel Ellis and his team at 2CR, and put together an electronic warfare package that allows us to bring capability to bear incrementally, gives us user feedback, and allows us to then modify it over time. And that's really what we've been doing since the beginning. There's a capability that's been through an operational assessment at Sabre Guardian. It also went through NIE 17-2 with the 2nd Brigade of the 101st, and now is in its final phases of operational assessment between now and the middle of November. So phase 1 decision for Europe will be made in December of this year. Phase 2, which will improve the capability, increase the density of sensors, improve the C2 system that we're using, also bring some aerial and dedicated terrestrial electronic support and electronic attack capability. That's already started. We'll start feeling that some in 18, the rest in 19. Colonel Ellis talked about probably the best thing, excuse me, the best thing in this partnership has been the feedback. So the EVOs within the 2nd Cavalry Regiment have been participating with us from the beginning, been very vocal on the things that they like and what they don't like. We've worked with them to figure out what are the corrective actions that need to be taken, what's the effect on force structure, how do we do training, how do we do sustainment. All of those focused on a specific CONOP with a specific theater allows us to go very, very fast. And really the measure for us has been the ability to give them a capability that they can look at us and say, we can fight this. It may not be, and it won't be, I can tell you that right now, it won't be the multifunctional electronic warfare solution that is institutional and enduring in the Army. But it gives us the ability to get something out there rapidly, provide deterrence, provide capability to soldiers. We're working a second effort called Titan for the 2CR, which is dealing with GPS in a GPS denied environment. It is a GPS enhanced non-GPS position navigation and timing solution that we're working now. It's under contract starting with Stryker, and then we'll put it in the ground combat vehicles. So from a rapid capability office, those are the two that we're working with the 2nd CR. I'm going to turn it over to General Bassett, who will talk about what ground combat vehicles is doing for Stryker.
All right, good afternoon. So if Mr. Wiltsie runs the Rapid Capabilities Office, I suppose that makes me the Slow Capabilities Office as the PO. So the truth is that all of us can deliver capabilities rapidly. But what it takes is a different approach to acquisition, and I think we've demonstrated that on the capabilities for 2CR. One of the big takeaways is that when you want to get something fast, the activities that you have to focus on, the things that have to be done to deliver capability, really do come down to the same set of activities. You have to design a combat vehicle, you have to build it, you have to test it, you have to field it. Right? Those activities, even if there were no acquisition process, we'd still want to do those things. And so as we approach the desire for additional lethality for Stryker and for 2CR in Germany, one of the going-in positions was we've got to reduce that total amount of time. So rather than starting with a detailed requirement, although we did start with an urgent operational needs statement, what we really started with was a statement of leader intent, which was General Hodges challenged us to come up with a process to deliver capability for additional lethality to Europe in an expedited fashion. And so one of the ways we did that was we took that design phase, how long does it take to design a Stryker with a turret on it, and we reduced that down to nearly zero. Okay, so we said we want a mature turret, we want a mature chassis, we leveraged capabilities off of our DVH Stryker, which had a better suspension. We married those together, and we asked General Dynamics to run a competition for that turret, looking at a turret that we could produce very quickly for our users and that we could then generate that capability in a very short amount of time. One of the things that enabled us to do that was a previous investment that the Army had made in 30-millimeter turrets called the XM813 gun, which was a ground combat vehicle GCV investment that we were able to make available, not just as part of the design, but some existing cannons that we had in hand that we could make available to General Dynamics and eventually to Kongsberg to shorten that period of time. And when you look at how long that front end of the program took from the moment we received dollars until we started delivering prototypes into test, it was around 15 months. The lead time on the cannon alone, if you had to manufacture it from scratch, is about 15 months. So as we talk about streamlining acquisition, that production lead time, we'd love for industry to shorten that. We recognize that there's business realities in shortening production lead times. And in this case, we made sure that we were not limited by the acquisition process or even the funding process, but rather limited by the speed that industry could go to deliver that capability. So we had a very rapid design. We built some prototypes. We've tested those prototypes, and now we're delivering production vehicles that will go to Europe next month for test with 2CR. Really record time for such a complex capability. Just for context, the turret itself, the Kongsberg turret, has over 5,000 unique parts that you have to establish a supply chain for. And so had we allowed a turret which was not in production or didn't have that supply chain into that competition, you would have seen a much longer period of time to deliver these capabilities. The other thing we did was we did not let a perfect solution become the enemy of a fielded solution. There had to be some flexibility in those requirements. So the original ONS that came out of 2CR, there were many things that ONS we didn't necessarily give them, right? We had to make some adjustments. And so when we looked at program alignment from money to requirements to acquisition to technology, we made sure those things lined up so that we could execute this program quickly. The other piece that I think was key was Congress's willingness to fund the 2CR effort within a single year of appropriations with FY16 dollars. And they actually funded it, I wouldn't say they funded it generously, but it was adequately funded. And then we challenged the team to say, if we can get some savings, and we tried to get some savings through the competition of the turret, what additional capabilities could you deliver in this time frame? And we focused those resources on adding a Javelin to the remote weapon station, which we knew from the feedback from the users would give them a key capability to have a mounted Javelin instead of only a dismounted Javelin within their Stryker formations. And fortunately, with the leadership of Colonel Dean and the partnership of Colonel Ellis, they were able to deliver a Javelin-mounted RWS within the budget we were originally allocated by Congress. And so I think tremendous success story. You know, there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together. In this case, when we talk about going fast and going alone, we didn't go alone. We went with a single user partner who could answer for the feedback from that user. So we got feedback and decisions very quickly from Colonel Ellis and his team. And so that, even though there was a partnership, in comparison to trying to field a capability to the entire Army, we were going fast by going alone with a single partner rather than trying to satisfy the breadth of stakeholders that we normally face. And we know as we follow this on with Army-wide capabilities, that collaboration and getting agreement from the entire Army on what we'll do for Stryker lethality is a much bigger challenge. And we're prepared to face that challenge because we know we want to add that capability across our force. Maybe not this exact capability, but we want to learn from the work here in 2CR. It's the first time that a remote turret has been fielded. We want to understand how his team is going to fight with that. And we've given them the opportunity to learn early on how they're going to fight that capability with a virtual fielding, even while we were continuing to deliver capability to give his soldiers a chance in a virtual environment to fight that system. We provided that in partnership with TARDEC and RDECOM. Great partnership, despite the fact that we were trying to go fast. So again, with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions from the crowd. Ask Colonel Ellis all the hard questions. Yes, sir. How do we handle safety releases? So that was part of what was going to drive that schedule, Tom. We ensured that there was enough testing to get the safety release before we put it in the hands of soldiers. So we did have to accommodate a safety release. I think what we didn't do was sort of the kind of exhaustive testing, the mathematically relevant testing that you would typically do. And having the existing turret with its mature design helped us shorten down the amount of testing that might be required. Great partnership with Major General John Charlton and the ATEC team in coming up with a schedule. You know, so as I go back to the big pieces of what we did, design, really short, mature turret, mature chassis. Build, leaning forward by providing the XM813 to enable that to be shortened. Test, reduced test plan, getting it in the hands of soldiers early to get that feedback, knowing that we're going to improve it with that feedback. We did find some things in test, right? We found that even though we'd had some testing in the RDT&E environment, we didn't get cold weather testing done, so we learned some things about the right lubricants to use. We learned some things about the maturity of that software, so we've been able to turn that pretty quickly to improve the software that was part of the Kongsberg turret design. And that's why you test. You test to learn things, and so we weren't surprised when we had to make some changes. But we were able to accommodate that within the schedule that we had.
The other thing I would tell you is sometimes when you lay out your test strategy, what you want to do is flip those things that are absolutely critical. So you got to do safety first. Then you can start to bring the unit in. Once you can assure this thing won't hurt him or hurt itself, then you can bring the unit in, and you can do that. You can do a lot of things in parallel, let you go fast.
The other thing we did on test was originally we had to decide how many prototype vehicles to buy before we approved production. There were some that started out with as few as 2, and then you got only 2 vehicles for testing. We ended up with 8, and that allowed us to do a lot of that testing and safety certification in parallel. Some other questions? Really? How about any planted questions? Did we plant any questions? All right. So again, at a time when everybody wants to talk about going fast in Army acquisition, this team, POGCS and our team, is not weighted on acquisition reform. We're going to bend the acquisition process to our will. And this team has been able to show how they've been able to do that by not making perfect solutions the enemy have fielded in better solutions, by allowing for an 80% solution, by really looking at the activities, activity-driven acquisition. When you strip away the process, you're left with the work. And that's the work that we focused on in getting that done, whether it's expedited APS or Stryker lethality, or the work we've done on the Lab 25 for the 82nd Airborne Division, or the AMPV program, which from contract award to delivery of 5 variants and prototypes was only 24 months. My guidance to my team has been, don't be a victim of the acquisition process. Bend it to your will. And so we look forward to some of the streamlining. We look forward to cross-functional teams that will help provide guidance so that as we, you go fast alone or you go far together, we recognize that with cross-functional teams, that'll help bring that together maybe in a more expedited way. But we're not waiting on that, right? We're not waiting on acquisition form to make this easier. My team's focused on delivering capability.
The other thing I would say is that what you see here are a couple of models that can be used as we go forward. But they're always the same theory, the same kind of focus. The requirements have some adjustment in them that allow us to flow to what the state of technology will allow us to do versus what the capability required is, and then incrementally get there. The second is user feedback. Having Colonel Ellis's team telling us in no uncertain terms, that is a piece of junk, you get it loud and clear, and then you can have the conversation about why. What is it about it? Can we fix it or do we throw it away? That's 2. That really helps us. The third thing is that it allows us to work the rest of the DOTLM at the same time. So as we bring gear, how are you going to support it? Who's going to use it? How does that help the commander make a decision? Have we sat down and had that conversation with the leadership about this is the capability you'll bring and how they integrate that into their op plan? And then lastly, incremental approach with operational assessments help us get there faster. It's not an effective, safe, effective.
Safe, suitable, and effective.
Yes. It does this and it doesn't do that. And so when you get into that type of strategy, it allows you to improve over time. These are 2 models that can be used as the Army goes forward.
So realize this isn't just about changing sort of little a acquisition. I talked to you about different models we followed, and one of the ways we did it on this program was by making it an engineering change instead of a whole new program. But this is about flexibility and requirements. If you want to have incremental capability, you need incremental requirements. And you can't let any single requirement keep you from going faster, right? You have to have, I think, a very pragmatic approach to allowing for, a solution that gives you 80% of your capability in half the time. And so I think this is a great example of what we can do when we work together with the feedback from Colonel Ellis's team, which has been fabulous. Have no doubt it shaped what we've delivered. The design decisions that 2CR made early on in this process shaped the capability that he's getting.
And sir, I'll close up. I do get questions from time to time about, how do you test and evaluate stuff in addition to the other missions you've been given across Europe, and are your soldiers, do they feel burdened with it? And I can tell you there's a culture inside the formation where sergeants, staff sergeants, sergeants first class enjoy being asked what they want the end product to look like. They enjoy having the conversation about all the capabilities these gentlemen both talked about. They enjoy providing that feedback, and in fact, they are frequently volunteering to be the ones to go down and test this stuff, to give that feedback, because like a lot of us wearing the uniform, I think they understand that if you're not willing to test it, evaluate it, and give that feedback, then you're going to have to live with whatever the product is that you get. And I think we've seen here time and again is that this has been a good system and a good product for us, and now there's a culture inside the formation where guys are actively seeking to be part of this process, which I think is pretty valuable, and hopefully this is the way we move forward as General Bassett talked about with the little A acquisition process. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great show.